My name is Zara Washington, and I'm a freelance research assistant living in Boston. I've always been fascinated by unexplained phenomena, but I never expected my casual curiosity about psychic predictions to lead me down a rabbit hole that would completely change how I view our world's hidden history. It all started 3 months ago when I was helping a documentary filmmaker organize archival footage about famous psychics. We had boxes of materials on Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet who died in 1945. Most people know him as a faith healer who gave readings while in a trance state, but what caught my attention were his eerily specific predictions about future events. While cataloging the documents, I kept finding references to predictions that seemed impossible for someone in the 1920s and 30s to make. He predicted the stock market crash of 1929 twice, once in February 1925, and again 6 months before it happened. He described the alliance between Germany, Austria, and Japan 5 years before the Tripartite Pact was signed. He even predicted the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls 2 years before they were found. But here's where things got really interesting. What started as routine archival work became an obsession when I began cross-referencing Cayce's predictions with current events. I'm talking about sitting at my laptop until 3 in the morning, following breadcrumbs that led me deeper and deeper into what can only be described as the most elaborate conspiracy of knowledge in human history. The first thing that made my professional instinct scream was the precision of his failed predictions. Yes, you heard that right. His failures were almost as revealing as his successes. Cayce predicted that Atlantis would rise near Bimini in 1968 or 69. It didn't happen exactly as described, but something incredible did occur. The Bimini Road was discovered in 1968, and more importantly, advanced sonar technology became available that same year, allowing us to map underwater structures for the first time in human history. What if his failed predictions weren't failures at all, but descriptions of the tools and timing needed to discover what he was really talking about? This realization hit me like a freight train when I started mapping his predictions against technological developments. Every major archaeological discovery of the past 20 years required technology that was developed within 5 years of Cayce's predicted timeline. It's like he wasn't just predicting discoveries. He was predicting when we'd have the tools to make them. But that was just the beginning of this rabbit hole. I was cross-referencing dates when something made my blood run cold. Cayce had made incredibly specific predictions about things that are happening right now, in 2024 and 2025. And the evidence suggesting he was right is mounting in ways that are absolutely mind-blowing. Let me walk you through what I discovered, because if I'm right about this, everything we think we know about ancient civilizations and human consciousness is about to change forever. The first breadcrumb appeared when I found a reading from 1938 where Cayce predicted that a portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and sea water near Bimini, expected in 68 or 69. Not so far away. The Bimini Road was indeed discovered in 1968, but that wasn't the shocking part. What made my hands literally tremble was finding recent reports from November 2024 about a massive underwater city discovered off the coast of Gujarat, India. This isn't just some random rock formation. We're talking about structures more than 5 miles long and 3 miles wide, sitting 126 feet below sea level. Carbon dating shows these ruins are approximately 9,500 years old. But here's the part that made me question everything. The discovery team found artifacts that suggest the civilization had advanced knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, and what appears to be energy manipulation techniques that we're only beginning to understand today. Pottery fragments contain microscopic metal inclusions arranged in patterns that modern materials scientists can't explain. Stone carvings depict celestial alignments that wouldn't be visible to the naked eye without advanced instruments. The lead archaeologist, R. Rao, described finding evidence of planning and engineering sophistication that challenges our understanding of prehistoric capabilities. When I read his detailed reports, I realized he was describing exactly what Cayce had predicted. Not just submerged cities, but repositories of advanced knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. Here's the thing that made me physically sick to my stomach. Cayce predicted this exact discovery. In reading after reading from the 1930s, He spoke of ancient civilizations rising from water and described advanced technologies that would be rediscovered when humanity was ready for them. What really sent chills down my spine was finding a 1937 reading where Cayce described these underwater cities as libraries of stone containing records of the first destruction and plans for the preservation of knowledge through the coming changes. He specifically mentioned that these discoveries would occur when the children of men learned to listen beneath the waves. Have you ever had that feeling when puzzle pieces start clicking together so fast it makes you dizzy? That's exactly what happened when I started researching what else was happening in 2024 that Cayce might have foreseen. The timing couldn't be more perfect or more suspicious. The second piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. In early 2024, they issued urgent updates to their world magnetic model because our planet's magnetic field is shifting faster than ever recorded in human history. Get this, the magnetic North Pole is now racing towards Siberia at 34 miles per year, compared to just 9 miles per year in the 1990s. GPS systems had to be recalibrated, airports had to adjust their runways, and navigation systems worldwide needed emergency updates. But here's the really disturbing part. The magnetic field isn't just shifting, it's weakening dramatically. Scientists at the European Space Agency reported that the South Atlantic anomaly, a region where Earth's magnetic field is particularly weak, has grown by 8% since 2020. This weakening is allowing increased cosmic radiation to reach Earth's surface, affecting everything from satellite operations to human biology. Tampa International Airport had to close its main runway for a week in 2011 just to adjust for magnetic changes. Now multiply that by hundreds of airports, thousands of ships, and millions of devices that rely on magnetic navigation. We're talking about a global infrastructure crisis that most people don't even know is happening. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. In reading 78-16 from 1936, Cayce was asked about great changes coming in 2000 to 2001. His response, when there is a shifting of the poles or a new cycle begins. He didn't just predict a pole shift, he gave a timeline. He said the shifting would begin in the late 90s and become noticeable by 2000 to 2001. The scientific community now confirms that the acceleration began in the mid-1990s, exactly as Cayce predicted. But wait, there's more. In reading 5748-5, Cayce described how the magnetic shift would affect human consciousness itself. He said that as the Earth's magnetic field weakened, people would experience enhanced sensitivity to vibrations and increased psychic awareness. He predicted that ordinary people would start having prophetic dreams, sensing others' thoughts, and experiencing what he called knowings without learning. Does any of this sound familiar? Have you noticed more people talking about intuitive experiences lately? Synchronicities that seem too frequent to be coincidence? A strange sense that reality is becoming more fluid, more responsive to consciousness? The most disturbing part was yet to come. I spent weeks digging through scientific journals, archaeological reports, and declassified documents. What I found suggests there's a pattern here that goes way beyond coincidence. Cayce wasn't just making lucky guesses. He was describing a coordinated sequence of events that are unfolding exactly as he predicted. The breakthrough came when I discovered something that made me question whether I was losing my mind or uncovering the biggest story in human history. I found a 1942 reading where Cayce described devices that think without brains and machines that learn from themselves. He predicted these would emerge when the records of Atlantis surface from their watery tombs. In March 2024, Google announced breakthrough developments in quantum AI that can learn autonomously and process information in ways that mimic consciousness. OpenAI revealed language models displaying emergent behaviors that weren't programmed into them. DeepMind published research on AI systems that seem to develop intuitive understanding without explicit training. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. Every major AI breakthrough of 2024 occurred within weeks of significant underwater archaeological discoveries. The timeline correlation is so precise it can't be coincidental. The Mumbai team announced their Gujarat underwater city findings on November 3rd. Google's quantum AI breakthrough was announced November 15th. The Yonaguni Monument Research Team published new evidence of artificial construction on November 22nd. Meta's announcement of consciousness-mimicking neural networks came November 29th. It's like someone or something is orchestrating the timing of these revelations. The breakthrough moment came when I realized that every major underwater archaeological discovery of the past 5 years corresponds to areas Cayce specifically mentioned in his readings about Atlantis and ancient civilizations. The Yonaguni Monument of Japan, Cayce called it part of the Pacific civilization in reading readings from the 1930s. The submerged city of Dwarka off India's coast, he described temples rising from water in that exact region. Even the recent discoveries in the Mediterranean match his descriptions of records hidden beneath the sea. But what really made me question everything I believed about reality was finding a 1943 reading where Cayce described mechanical devices that would be discovered in underwater cities, devices that could harness energy from the Earth's magnetic field and create communication across vast distances without wires. When you think back to all the recent breakthrough announcements in quantum computing, brain-computer interfaces, and wireless energy transmission, does the timing seem strange now? Major tech companies announced revolutionary developments in these exact areas throughout 2024, almost like they're following some kind of predetermined schedule. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. Neuralink announced successful human brain-computer interface trials in January 2024. Tesla revealed wireless energy transmission patents in March. IBM's quantum computer achieved quantum advantage in computational consciousness modeling in June. These aren't incremental improvements. These are fundamental breakthroughs that scientists said were decades away. But the most shocking discovery came when I found internal documents from the National Science Foundation showing that funding for consciousness research, underwater archaeology, and magnetic field studies increased by over 400% between 2022 and 2024. Someone with serious influence has been pouring unprecedented resources into exactly the areas Cayce predicted would become crucial. I started making a timeline, and the pattern is undeniable. Every major prediction Cayce made for this time period is manifesting simultaneously. Underwater cities emerging, magnetic poles shifting, consciousness-expanding technologies appearing, and what he called the awakening of humanity's dormant abilities. The most chilling discovery came when I found internal memos from the Association for Research and Enlightenment, Cayce's foundation. They've been quietly tracking these developments for decades, maintaining detailed records of how current events match his predictions. It's like they've been preparing for something they knew was coming. But it gets even stranger. The ARE has been in regular contact with research teams at major universities, technology companies, and government agencies. They've been providing consultation services based on Cayce's readings to guide research directions. In other words, some of the world's most advanced scientific projects are being influenced by predictions made by a man who died almost 80 years ago. Have you noticed how many coincidences have been happening lately? The discovery of advanced ancient technologies, just as we're developing similar tech ourselves. The emergence of underwater cities precisely when we have the technology to explore them properly. The acceleration of magnetic pole shifts exactly when Cayce said they would occur. According to Reading 5748-6, these discoveries aren't random. They're part of what he called the return of ancient knowledge that would prepare humanity for a new phase of consciousness evolution. He predicted that between 2020 and 2030, we would rediscover technologies that would change the relationship between mind and matter. But here's something that made me sit there staring at my computer screen for an hour. Cayce predicted that the ancient civilization responsible for these hidden records wasn't just from Atlantis. He described a global network of advanced societies that existed before the last ice age, all connected by what he called the universal consciousness grid. He said this network included civilizations in the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and even in areas now covered by ice in Antarctica. Each civilization specialized in different aspects of consciousness technology. Some focused on healing, others on energy manipulation, others on what he called thought transmission across space and time. The most mind-blowing part is how accurately he described modern quantum physics concepts decades before scientists developed the theories. He spoke of vibrational frequencies affecting physical reality, consciousness influencing molecular structure, and instantaneous communication across any distance, basically describing quantum entanglement, consciousness-based healing, and quantum computing. In a 1944 reading, Cayce described how ancient civilizations used crystals attuned to planetary frequencies to power their cities and enhance human consciousness. He said these crystals worked by aligning individual awareness with the Earth's electromagnetic field, creating a state where mind and matter dance together as one. Does this sound familiar? Because in September 2024, researchers at Stanford announced the discovery of crystalline structures in recently excavated underwater sites that exhibit unusual electromagnetic properties and resonance patterns that seem designed to interact with biological neural networks. Here's what really sent chills down my spine. Cayce predicted that the magnetic pole shift would trigger what he called enhanced psychic abilities in ordinary people. People would start experiencing increased intuition, telepathic episodes, and prophetic dreams. He said this would begin when the magnetic field reached a certain level of instability. I can't help but wonder, have you experienced anything unusual lately? Strange dreams that later came true? Sudden intuitive insights about people or situations? An inexplicable sense that reality is shifting in ways you can't quite explain. Because according to multiple studies published in 2024, reports of anomalous experiences have increased by over 60% since 2022. Universities are quietly establishing research programs to study what they're calling enhanced human intuition events. The data suggests something is definitely happening to human consciousness on a global scale. The implications of all this are staggering. If Cayce was right about everything else, then we're not just witnessing random archaeological discoveries and natural phenomena. We're experiencing the planned emergence of ancient knowledge that was deliberately hidden until humanity reached a specific level of technological and spiritual development. Think about it. What if the magnetic pole shift isn't just a natural occurrence, but a trigger mechanism designed by an ancient civilization? What if these underwater cities aren't just ruins, but preservation systems waiting for the right conditions to be revealed? What if our recent technological breakthroughs aren't human innovations, but rediscoveries of principles that were encoded in our consciousness thousands of years ago? Cayce repeatedly stated that the people of Atlantis knew their civilization was about to be destroyed, so they created multiple preservation systems. They encoded their knowledge in three ways: physical records hidden in Egypt and the Yucatan, technological principles embedded in the Earth's energy grid, and genetic memories implanted in human consciousness that would activate when specific environmental conditions were met. According to his readings, the magnetic pole shift serves as the activation key for this ancient system. As the Earth's magnetic field changes, it triggers dormant areas of human consciousness while simultaneously revealing the physical locations where records and technologies were preserved. The technology emerging now isn't entirely new. It's the result of ancient knowledge surfacing in the minds of researchers and inventors who don't even realize they're channeling information from a civilization that existed over 10,000 years ago. What I've discovered has completely changed how I see the world. Every major news story about archaeological discoveries, technological breakthroughs, or environmental changes now feels like another piece of an enormous puzzle that Edgar Cayce mapped out almost a century ago. The most profound realization is that we're not just passive observers of these changes. We're active participants in the unfolding of an ancient plan. Our consciousness, our choices, and our collective awakening are all part of what Cayce called the return of the sons of light. I've spent countless nights wondering about the full scope of what's coming. If Cayce was right about the timeline, we're still in the early stages. He predicted that the period from 2020 to 2030 would be marked by the opening of sealed chambers and the return of knowledge that was hidden. But here's what keeps me awake at night. Cayce also predicted that not everyone would be ready for these revelations. He spoke of a separation of consciousness, where some people would embrace the expanding awareness while others would resist it, creating a division in human society unlike anything in recorded history. I can already see this happening. Some people are having profound spiritual experiences, reporting enhanced intuition and psychic phenomena. Others are becoming more rigidly materialistic, desperately clinging to old explanations, even as evidence mounts that reality operates according to principles we're only beginning to understand. The question that haunts me is this: what happens when the general public becomes aware of these connections? When people realize that ancient civilizations possessed technologies we're only now rediscovering? When the evidence becomes undeniable that consciousness and physical reality are far more interconnected than mainstream science admits? Cayce predicted this awakening would be gradual but unstoppable. He said the truth would emerge through what appears to be coincidence and synchronicity, making it impossible for those who are ready to ignore, while remaining invisible to those who aren't prepared for it. As I sit here, surrounded by months of research, I realize I've become part of the very phenomenon Cayce predicted. Someone who was meant to find these connections and share them with others who are ready to see the bigger picture. So I'm asking you, what do you think about these discoveries? Have you noticed the acceleration of unusual phenomena in your own life? Do you feel like we're on the verge of something unprecedented in human history? Because if Edgar Cayce was right about everything else, then what we're experiencing now is just the beginning. The most profound revelations are still to come, and they're going to change everything we thought we knew about human potential, ancient history, and the true nature of reality itself. The sleeping prophet's greatest predictions are waking up, and we're all part of the story he saw unfolding almost a century ago.